much, Ryan. Those games were awesome. I loved those games. Did you guys have a lot of fun?
Yeah.
I love playing games right now. We're going to play another one. This one's one of my favorites. It's called Two Truths and a Lie. So what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you guys 2 things that are true about myself and 1 thing that's a lie. And you guys have to figure out which one's a lie, okay? So A, I once threw up all over a complete stranger at Wild Waves.
Oh.
B, I once shaved off both my eyebrows. And C, I once made fun of a girl so much that I made her have a seizure. Okay, so which one? Who guesses?
A.
A.
The
Give
puke
some
one.
A's. Do I hear any B's?
No.
No B's. Any C's? Okay, a couple C's. All right. Well, the truth is, I've never thrown up all over a complete stranger at Disneyland. In an unfortunate series of events, I did shave off both my eyebrows when I was a freshman, and I shaved it off at the beginning of summer. It took the whole summer to grow back. It was horrible. And C, yes, in 8th grade, I made fun of a girl so much that she had a seizure. Because in middle school, I was just this huge jerk. I just made fun of whoever I wanted to. I did whatever I wanted to. I was kind of like, in the popular crowd at school, so I thought I could get away with anything. And there was this one girl, her name was Chelsea, and she, if Napoleon Dynamite was a girl, it'd be this girl. She was just tore up from the floor up. We made fun of her every single day about anything that we could. We made fun of the way that she drank soda like this. She would like this, and she was just jacked up, and we just made fun of her for anything and everything, every single day. And so one day, we're in block class, and we're doing our silent reading. And so everything's quiet, and all of a sudden my friend Vinny yells out from the back of the room. He goes, "Mr. Bowers, something's wrong with Chelsea." And we look back, and she's like, she's foaming up the mouth, and her eyes are rolling back in her head, and she falls out of her seat. And Mr. Bowers runs over and picks her up. She's like, "Oh, she's having a seizure! Oh, go get the school nurse!" And so this kid runs and gets the school nurse, and it was really dramatic. She was all over the place. I was like, "Wow, this girl's even weirder than I thought." And the school nurse comes, they get her in a wheelchair, they wheel her out, and she looks like, she just died or something. I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck? And the next day, she wasn't at school for a couple days. The next day, Mr. Bowers calls me and my little group of friends up to class. He's like, "I need to talk to you guys." I'm like, "What's going on?" And he says, "You know why Chelsea had that seizure yesterday? It's because of you." And you're like, "What?" "She had to start taking antidepressants because of you. And they messed up her system because of you. She had that seizure because of you." And so we're like, oh my gosh. And so we kind of laid off Chelsea for a little bit. And I moved on to this kid that we called Greasy Pete. He was just one of those kids, he's kind of a little smelly, he didn't shower all the time. His hair was just long and greasy, and he had a lot of pimples. And so we called him Greasy Pete. We made fun of him all the time. And one day at lunch, I decided I was going to take Greasy Pete's backpack. And so I took it, and it wasn't just like a funny joke, "Haha, I took your backpack, here it is, haha." It was like I took it, and I was never going to give it back to him. I hid it in a place where he would never find it. I hid it way behind the bleachers in the cafeteria so that no one could ever find it. And so he went throughout the day, and he couldn't find his backpack, and he started crying, and he went to the counselor, and eventually someone ratted on me, so the counselor came and got me, and had to go get his backpack and give it back and apologize, and I called my parents and whatever. So that's how my life in middle school was. I was just a big jerk to a lot of people, and when I look back on it now, I really feel bad, but I realized that the reason I did that wasn't because I was just a big jerk. It was really because I was really hurting inside. I had a lot of junk in my life, and I was really trying to mask all the stuff that was going on in my life, and I felt like I couldn't be real with anybody, so I just took out all that anger and all that hurt and all that frustration out on other people. Because I remember when I was little, my parents got divorced, and so we used to live in Southern California. When they got divorced, I moved up here with my mom and my brothers, and my dad moved up shortly after, and so he lived a couple miles away from us. We used to always go over to his house on the weekends, hang out. And one weekend, we showed up at my dad's house. I was in about 7th grade. We showed up at my dad's house, and there's a for sale sign in the front yard, and the house is empty, and he's just gone. He just completely left. We didn't know where he was. We didn't know where he went. We didn't know why. And he didn't bother to call or write. I didn't hear from him for 4 years until I finally figured out where he was, and I called him. I didn't see him for 6 years until I went down to California to visit him again. But that was something that really hit me hard in middle school. And at the same time as that, if you guys remember, a long time ago, the economy was really down, and so a lot of people were losing their jobs just like they are now. And both my parents were managers at Boeing, and Boeing did all these layoffs, and both my parents got laid off at the same time. And the economy was so bad that they couldn't find jobs for a whole year. And so for a whole year, my family was just dirt poor. We were used to living this kind of lifestyle. We were never like super rich or anything, but we always had everything that we needed. And I remember just being so embarrassed about that. I felt like I couldn't be real about that at school, and so I took it out on other people. Do you guys know T.I., the famous rapper? He's all over MTV, he's all over iTunes, he's all over the radio right now. He's the hot stuff, top of the billboards. Back in the day, there was a rapper called Nelly. And Nelly was he was what everyone was listening to. He was all over MTV, he was all over, the Billboard charts. He had all the top hits, and he came out with this song called Air Force One. And it went like this. It said, "Give me 2 purrs, I need 2 purrs, so I can get to stomping in my Air Force Ones." That's how the song went. And it was about these Air Force Ones, these Nike shoes that were so cool. And right after that song came out, everyone and their brothers went out and they bought these Air Force Ones. So all the cool kids in school had these sick Air Force Ones, and I was poor, so I couldn't afford them. I was still walking around in my Adidas, and I remember just being so embarrassed about that we couldn't afford Air Force Ones, and we couldn't afford school lunches, so I had to go on reduced lunch, and we had to start going to the food bank because we were so poor. I was just so embarrassed about that. And all that stuff was just building up in my life, and I just felt like I couldn't be real about it. I couldn't talk to anybody about it. I couldn't tell anybody what was going on, and so I just took out all that anger and all that frustration on other people. At the same time as all that was going on, I found out my oldest brother, Richard, he was addicted to drugs, and he was a drug addict, and he finally eventually came to my mom and told her that he needed to get into rehab. And so he got into rehab, and I remember at that time I was in 9th grade, and after he got out of rehab, he started going to AA meetings, and his AA sponsor brought him to our church, and then he brought our whole family to our church. And so I went to this church, and it was just kind of weird. They sang songs, and they talked about God, they talked about the Bible. I didn't really understand it. But I heard, my first time going to that church, I heard that the high school youth group was going on a winter retreat. And I heard that they were going to be snowboarding and snowmobiling and doing all this cool stuff. And so I signed up, and I went, wow, that'd be really cool to just get away for a weekend and go snowmobiling and go snowboarding. So I went, and it was awesome. We had a lot of fun, but I really felt, I was like, man, these guys tricked me. They got me here for this weekend, and yeah, they got all this cool stuff, but now they're trying to teach me about God. And so I had to sit every morning, every night. They would, sing their songs, and they'd have this guy come up. He'd talk about God. He'd talk about the Bible, and I just didn't really get it. I didn't understand any of what was going on. But as the weekend went on, it was like a 3 or 4 day thing. As the weekend went on, I began to see these people, and I began to realize, you know what? They seem like they have something that I don't have. They feel like they have joy. They have an extra amount of love in their lives, and that's just kind of weird. And so the last night before we were about to leave, I remember going to bed, and as I was going to bed, I guess I prayed the first prayer of my life. I prayed to a God that I wasn't even sure existed, and I remember I just said, God, this is weird. These people are weird, but I feel like they have something that I don't have. If you're real, then I want to believe in you, but I'm just not going to be able to believe in you unless you make me believe in you, unless you show me that you're real. So I prayed that prayer for the first time in my life. And the next morning I wake up, and we go to this chapel, and this guy gets up, and before he even starts talking, he says, "Is there someone here named Michael?" And I was like, yeah, that's me. I kind of raised my hand, and he had me stand up, and he said, "Michael, I just want you to know that God heard your prayer last night, and your relationship with God is going to start right now, and your relationship with God is going to grow from this point on, and you're gonna grow madly in love with God.